And we are live. Welcome, everyone. I am Rebbetzin Bat-Chen Grossman from ConnectedForReal.com, and I'm a marriage coach for women in business. And this show is all about how real life affects marriage. So today we have Rifka, who is going to tell us a lot about how money and our finances affect our marriage. And she's going to introduce herself right now. So, presenting to you, Rifka.
Hi, I'm Rifka Lebowitz. Thank you so much, Rebbetzin Bat-Chen, for inviting me to speak today. I'm a financial consultant. I help people live better. I help people use their money to do good, to make more money, and to live the life they want to live.
That's amazing. How did you get into that? And what do you do now specifically? Like, how do you do this?
Okay, so I got into it. The truth is, when I was in high school and all my friends were like talking, what they want to do, one said they want to be a lawyer, another, everyone's saying what they want to do. I was like, I want to help people with their money. I always had this liking to helping people with money. So that's what I said, but it was not a profession at the time. So I went into the investment world. And then a number of years later, I moved into personal finance, learning to be a CFP. I'm author of a book called Smarter is Really Banking, and creator of a course for couples about money. What I do on a day-to-day basis is really help people who are maybe overwhelmed with their money or not doing well with money, or couples that have money problems, we'd say. Doesn't mean they don't have money, but they have issues with their money. And I help them. I help them both on a behavioral side. I help them, I use a lot of behavioral economics knowledge in my work, and also on the financial side, how to deal with their finances.
That's amazing. So I want to get straight into the couples course because that is my specialty. And I'm like, yeah, let's get into that. What do you think is the biggest problem or the biggest issue or the biggest challenge when couples, either first get married and have to deal with money for the first time together or for the first time ever? And also, 20 years down the line when there's still problems, what do you have to enlighten us with?
So I'd say that when couples first get married, they don't know what to talk about when it comes to money. They don't know what to say. You tell someone to have a money conversation, they're like, so let's make a budget. That's like the most they can do. And there's a much deeper conversation that has to happen between a couple. And the earlier they have these conversations, the better it is. Meaning when you're saying and you see it 20 years later, well, 20 years later, you're seeing it because it never happened at the beginning. So that's the idea also of the course, let's talk about money properly from the beginning. So what is it that's missing in the money conversation? It's not about budgeting, while that is a very important component. The conversation should start from a place of what you think of money, what your background is with money, what your expectations are. And couples don't talk like that. They're not like, look, I really, I don't know. I've always been from a poor family and I don't know how to make money. That is something that is so deep in someone sometimes that shows in their work and what they're going to do, because they'll probably keep with that pattern and that thought process. Or someone else might be like, oh yeah, we always made money. There was always money and I could just spend, whatever, because I always had money and I always will. And it's an attitude thing. And sometimes we just need to talk about it, what it means when we need to spend money. Here's an example. There are families where a birthday comes around and you get a big gift. It's really important that you get a gift. The gift is showing how much you love someone, right? And there are families where you don't need to get a gift. You can, go for a picnic in the park and make a fuss on them and they're happy. So if you can understand that if you have a couple and one's like the first family and one's like the second, they're going to get each other different types of birthday gifts, spend different amounts of money. And it's going to be like, he didn't get me a birthday gift. He just took me to the park for a picnic. Doesn't he value me? Where does it come in? A lot of these things, while it's not really money, it is money. At the core of it, it comes to money, how we see money, how we spend money. it's a pretty big deal in marriage, and the earlier couples can talk about it, and the more they understand that they need to talk about it, and that their history, their personalities, the whole financial history, financial personalities, financial expectations should be a very big part of their conversation.
Right. You know, you were talking about gifts, and the cutest thing, the biggest thing, the biggest thing about the 5 love languages is that, is that like people who are into, you can't make noise. You have to just be quiet. Hello.
Hello.
My blessing came to visit me. So gifts, unlike words of affirmation and acts of service, which we all get, you understand that somebody's really showing you how much they love you by doing the dishes and, getting the kids and running the house and whatever. Like, they're trying their best to show through their love language. People get the least gifts. Like, they don't understand it. It just doesn't click. If you're not a gift person, it's just not your thing, And if that's not your language, it's like the least understood language of all 5, It's like, I don't know why he thinks this thing is going to mean anything. I just went to the store and bought it. Like, I didn't put any effort into it, whatever. But like, and then she can't receive his gifts properly because she doesn't get why it is such an important thing that like he went and picked it and thought about it and like brought it to her and whatever. To her, you could have just written a letter. It would have been fine, right? So
Right.
gifts are one of the least understood love languages, which is really interesting. And it's interesting that it came up here.
And then I'll just add
Yeah.
that the couple are sharing money, right? Assuming they're sharing money. And they're like, maybe one of them's like, oh, they didn't get me a gift for my birthday. And like, that was important to them. And the other one's like, we're on a budget. We're trying to cut down. We don't want to spend. So of course I didn't, and the first one's like, but for birthdays, we would splurge, like everyone has their things that like, even if we're cutting back or even if we're being careful, there are things we still splurge on. And that's
Yes.
also different acceptances when it comes to gifts. Like what is okay? What do we want to,
I love
splurge
it.
on?
I love that you brought this up. I want to ask you a really interesting question that came up a lot recently. And it's interesting that things like these just come up. Should couples share their money from the start? That was something that came in, to my desk. And I wanted to hear your take on it.
Right. So I have a whole thing on trust. Basically, the idea is if we're going to build a life together and we're going to share everything, then I do believe we should get to a point where we're sharing money. Okay. That said, it doesn't need to be from day one. I think people need to build trust. It also depends how long they're together. And, if one has a lot more than the other, one's much more savvy, they might feel, less confident and comfortable sharing. But I think the ideal place that we want to get to is a place where we're sharing everything. We're true partners. So of course we're going to share our money. If that's not from day one, that's fine. I really think it's fine. I think there are people who are ready to do that at day one. It also depends when couples are meeting in life and when they're, if we're talking about a really young couple who really starting out with nothing, then yeah, they're totally sharing from the beginning. If we're talking about someone older who's already got a profession and built up maybe a stock portfolio or something, that might be, it might take a longer. If we're talking about a second marriage, then a lot of times people really don't want to share their money there. There could be kids involved, there could be an ex involved, then it gets complicated. So in that case, I might say no. But in other cases where it's, first marriage, and especially if people are starting out young, yes, the ideal is to get to a place where we totally, we're together in this. This is a long-term commitment. We are sharing money.
I feel like, I have a rule that I tell my friends. It's better to have a shorter engagement and date longer than to have a long engagement. Like, just get engaged and then figure it out and then have this like long drawn out engagement until the wedding. And the reason why I say this is because the second you get engaged, there's this like everything flips. It's suddenly like, okay, now we're really doing this. And like, pressure starts to build, and you're not talking from a place of like, I still have a back door. I could still figure out if this is right for me. But if you are not 100% sure and you're not ready to get married and you're not like, in that mindset of, okay, I'm ready, I'm making a wedding, I'm getting ready, then don't get engaged, right? There's like that in between thing that you just don't want to be in for too long. So date for as long as you need, discuss all the stuff for as long as you need, and like really bring all these things up. I used to have a list that I got from a friend of the 10 questions to ask when you're dating. And one of them was, how are we going to support ourselves? And it was such a good question because a lot of my friends were not aware of what they're going to do for that. Like, I don't know, it'll just happen. Especially the girls, they just didn't really, it didn't calculate in their mind how that was going to happen. Like you said, I always had money. I'm going to have money. I don't know. And so it's one of those things that I'd rather you talk about when you're still not committed, and know that once I commit fully, than if you half commit and then question yourself, and then is like in this middle place limbo thing where you're like not married but not single, and like I don't know what to do anymore. That is like it's a place of a lot of pressure in a lot of different aspects. So that's just something that came up to me when you were talking. But I like your
Right.
answer. Definitely, I've seen second marriages have more, like they're just more comfortable staying, in their spaces. In
Yeah,
their
I think also when you said like dating and the questions, I think, I mean, I bring up, let's say in the course or when I speak to young couples, I bring up a lot of questions like that. Like these are questions that need to be asked. Like it might be obvious to me, when I was dating, that my husband is going to make money and so am I, right? And it might have been obvious to him that only his wife was making money or that only he was making money. Like some things are just obvious to us, like, I don't know, whatever. And some people like know and some people don't necessarily know, like you said, but asking that question and just understanding each other's expectations helps avoid disappointment. Like if I expected that we'd both make 50-50, but maybe my husband expected he'd make nothing. Okay, maybe that's not, most people is not the case, but let's just say I'd be super disappointed if he really expected not to make anything and just maybe supporting him if I wasn't in that headspace. So these are questions that couples should for sure ask and find out and understand the expectation.
I
Super
agree.
important.
I'm I I love this. Okay, I have two things. One is that I have to go get a charger because my computer's dying. so you,
Okay.
so you keep talking. I'll be right back. But the thing
Okay.
I want you to really address is the deeper stuff, the mindset things. Like now we talked about the surface of how are we going. Charger? Yeah, could you get it from there, the big one? Thank you. Good thing to have a little blessing around. Um, there's like the surface stuff of, how are we going to support ourselves? What is money going to come from? How am I going? The biggest one. Is he going to find it? We'll see. And then there's like the more deeper stuff. What do I believe about people with money, and what do I think about having money or not having money? Is it, what type of family did I come from, and what are the soundtracks, if you want to say, that are going through my mind when I think of money? So I want you to address that. I'm gonna get.
Okay. Okay, you go get the charger. I'll address that. So, first of all, I think it's very subconscious for a lot of people. And we do a little exercise sometimes where I tell people, like, think of the first 20 seconds or a minute, just say anything you can about money. Because what we really think about money comes out when we talk like that. So, I think that's super important to really understand, like, what we think, and a lot of it comes from what we've heard. If someone's saying, well, you know, it could be rich people are bad because, they're not sharing all their money. Like, what a ridiculous thing. Maybe they're giving lots of tzedakah, and the fact that they're rich is because they worked hard and did something you didn't do. But people have these beliefs that they don't even they need to question them. Are they correct? So I say that couples need to discuss these things. As I said, we bring it up like in a game where we like, okay, 20 things about money, first things you can think of. And it really comes out when you're on the spot, what you actually think comes out.
You know, I love
Yeah.
that. I did the work, the work by Byron Katie.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I did the work on money. And it was so fascinating. I also did the work on food, by the way. It was really fascinating because the work is supposed to be about relationships with people. And after I got to a certain level where I was really an expert at how to use the work to help people get through these like relationship things, I wanted to see what would happen if you do it on something like food or money. And it was amazing. Food is complicated. It causes me pain when, stomach aches and this and that. Like all these things I had believed about food. And like money is, not coming to me, or it's, it's stuck, or I don't like all these things that I felt about money at the time, which were really interesting. Because once I realized, I'm like, it has nothing to do with money. Like I'm the stuck one. Like I'm the one that's not respecting the money or whatever. Like whatever came up, it was just amazing to do the turnarounds on that. And so yeah, I totally like that is something that I really like, is the deeper level questions. But I think that you have to go through all of it. You have to go through the superficial stuff and the deep stuff, and then you get deeper and deeper, and it's not something that you get over. It's something that you get through and you have to keep working through. Like
You can change your attitude about money. You definitely can change your beliefs. You can question them. I know I've done it personally. A lot of work on the, just questioning a lot of stuff I used to think or accidentally say. Or I'll just give an example for our listeners, okay? Let's say you're at an event or at the park, or I don't know, you're talking to a bunch of people. What's more likely to come up when it's money? It reflects a lot both about society and about us. So it's possible that people will complain that, oh, whatever costs so much. So that says something about us all, like who's talking? Why are we complaining about whatever? Or there may be societies, there may be people where we're showing off about money. Also says something about society, and we can change both. Like I help people very much work on like being comfortable with money. We don't need to show off. We don't see it as something bad. It's a good thing. It helps us serve our purpose in the world. It helps us do our thing. It does help. They say money doesn't bring happiness, but a certain amount really, really helps. It helps us go on vacation and relax as a couple. It helps. It's a tool that truly is helpful.
It's definitely a tool. But I think if you don't do the work, then you're gonna continue using it as an excuse. Because you see people who are totally falling for that. They'll be like, oh, if I just had this much money, then I'll be happy. Then things will work out. Then I'll be able to go on vacation. They go on vacation, they fight the whole time. They're having a miserable time. Their kids are, whatever. And it's like, oh, forget it. It wasn't worth it. Right. And like, you didn't do the work. So you did the money, but you didn't do the work behind what you believe about money. And that
totally. Yeah. Sorry if I came across that like, oh, money will make you happy. No, it does not make you happy. Your attitude, your whatever makes you happy. But money is helpful once you're happy to be able to do things, relax together, whatever it is, just do things that can be very meaningful that sometimes you don't have money for otherwise. So I see with couples, like it is a helpful tool. What can I say? It's a helpful tool. And people that are stressed about money, it does put a stress on the relationship. People get to blame each other. People get to like, well, if only he did this and if only she did that. And I definitely see that, it definitely comes between couples.
Yes. And I think that it's just a symptom because they like, we like to blame it on money. Oh, if we just had, everybody goes through the money dip when they're, in sometime in their marriage. There's going to be a time when there's money stress. And it doesn't matter if you're a millionaire and you have sudden like loss in your business or something and you're stressed about the money and suddenly it brings stress to the home. Or if you're completely poor and your house is, I don't know what, roofless and it's a complete disaster. Everybody has to go through it because it's one of those tests that you're going to grow through or you're going to go through. Like, it's, you get a choice, right? But like, it's not about the money as much as it is about the work and the transformation that it's here to cause. And I feel like it's an easy excuse. Like, oh, we had so much trouble with money. We couldn't even like talk straight. We couldn't communicate. We couldn't, we were just screaming at each other all the time. Like, really? I was
But then
blessed with that.
tools, right? But then the tools are see money as something, and you as a couple, you're a unit, you're a couple. We're going through this hard time, whatever that hard time is together. It could be a financial hard time or any other hard time, and we need to get through it. It's not for blaming. It's not for like, oh, he's so lazy or she's so lazy and they're not working. It's like, how do we as a couple, what are resources? What can we pull together so that we can have enough money that we're not super stressed about it? When I'm working with wealthier people, financial planning type things, we're also talking about like you have money. So it doesn't mean you don't have other problems. You can have plenty other problems and plenty bad stuff in your life, but use the money for what's valuable so that you can have be happy as much as possible, not because of the money, but if you have the money, the least you could do is try and like have the best life possible, poor or rich. But certainly when people have the money, I feel like it's such a shame to be miserable about money when you have money.
Right.
It's a challenge there too.
What's interesting, something that comes up with my clients, because I am very specific in my niche. It's, women in business and how their business is being affected by their marriage and how their marriage is being affected by their business. And so women will hold themselves back from growing their business because it's going to affect their marriage, because they see that it's stepping on his ego, or it's, paying a price on their marriage. And they feel like if I grow too much, if I grow too big, if I become too successful, then my marriage will pay a price. And I'm not willing to do that because my marriage is too much of a priority for me. And it's no surprise you see all these people who reach the, big milestones. Oh, she finally reached 6 figures and then got divorced. She finally, reached 7 figures and then got divorced. Like, we don't want to end up there. So what do? Right? That's the stress that's subconscious. And so you don't let yourself grow. And I would love to talk about that a little bit, that angle of how do you let go of all that fear and allow yourself to have the success that you can have, because you're here to make like you're in a purpose. God sent you here to spread his light and, make an impact in the world, and you have all the gifts to do it. And you're holding yourself back because there's another really important priority, which is your husband and your marriage. And like, they're conflicting and it stinks.
Right. I sort of feel sad when it's conflicting because, like, really, we want to be super supportive of each other. Like, we should want each other to grow as far as possible. So I feel like that's not about money and more about, like, can we find a way in our marriage we can really support each other no matter how far we each fly, and we're going to support each other while we each fly.
Yes. So let me tell you a secret, like we were talking about Byron Katie's work before. It's a lot about turnarounds. Like, I felt this way. That's why I got into it. I was a graphic designer for 15 years and I was climbing the ladder, and I felt like anytime I came into the house, I'd have to lower the volume on myself because I was on such a high from being so important, going to Tel Aviv and having a meeting with all these people. And they really appreciated my, my experience and my knowledge. And I gave them advice and they were asking me for my opinion. I was like, woohoo. And then I'd come home and I'd be like, wait, okay, lower it, breathe it out. Now you're just a normal mom. Like, get into those shoes and go walk in the house, not with all of that, because it's scary, right? It's like it didn't align. And it was in my head. It wasn't my husband saying anything. My husband was happy for me. He was super supportive. He was doing everything. He was watching the kids until 6 o'clock when I finally drove in and like, like was exhausted from a full day of being active. But I was thinking it. And so I was resentful and I was in a conflict. So I agree with you that it's sad, but the answer is really to help ourselves. That's why I work with women,
Right.
How do I help you get that alignment so that you can really succeed and thrive without giving everybody else the ownership over that. Like, of course, I was blaming my husband because he's easy to blame. But then when I actually took responsibility, I was like, oh, he's actually not jealous. So why am I so scared, right? Like, I guess I have to give myself permission to fly. And that was even scarier. So then you
It's
do it.
true. It's so true. I think it has nothing to do with husband. Like when you go back to your previous question, I don't think it's to do with your husband, or not your husband specifically. I mean, one's spouse. The fear of flying. I think what you said now, it's like it's just blaming. We're scared for whatever reason. We're scared because we think small, because we whatever. We're just scared to go ahead. So, yeah, maybe you blame your spouse. You're probably just as embarrassed from your girlfriends that you feel so, wow, I'm doing so well. I don't think it's the spouse. And I don't think it's a marriage thing. I really think it's a personal thing. Just like you said, there's work for us to do because the people that love us really are there to support us and they're happy for us. And if they're not happy for us, well, then I hope we can find a way that we could be happy for them and they could be happy for us. But I just don't think it's a spouse thing. I really think it's an us thing. It's a
Right. And
scare, like, oh, I'll become one of these big business owners and I'll forget, my values. No. The people that don't have values when they're rich or big business owners didn't have values when they weren't rich. It's nothing to do with it. But sometimes we perceive it that way.
It's so interesting because the first thing we said in this conversation is it's about money, but it's not really about money. And now we're like, it's about the husband, but it's really not about the husband, right? And it always will happen that way because when you're really honest with yourself, everything comes back to what you can control. And that's what stinks is because then you actually have to face it.
Right? Got to do the work.
And so the women in my group are doing amazing work and they're journaling and they're getting through all of this gunk that I had to go through. I'm up to I think my 5th journal since the beginning of COVID. And
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I never journaled before, but I got into it and now I'm like, this is so cool. I wrote a letter to money one time and I was like, oh, I just realized something. If I have money, then I'm not going to have as strong of a connection with God. And I was like, what? But until I wrote it, I didn't even think it. It was so deep in my subconscious. Like to me, my relationship with God was so important that I wasn't willing to give it up even for, money and success. And when I stopped equating them, that's when I finally was able to break through. So it's these are the types of conversations, that light me up because it really is part of the work, part of the transformation that we're here to do.
Absolutely. I think and when couples can sort of, see that deeper level, like you just said about, you had this belief that like money that wasn't serving you well, you can't have a connection with God if you have a lot of money or if whatever. So you need to challenge yourself. Like, what are my values? And that's something we also discuss a lot. Like, what are my values? I go through an exercise I do, like, where would you give charity if you give $1 million? And the idea of the exercise is to understand that no matter how much you have, no matter how successful you're going to be, if that's something you value, if giving charity is something you value, then let's think big. We could help a lot more people if we could give $1 million. We could help a lot more people if we give 10 million, right? And we challenge people to sort of think and like keep your values as you go on. Don't be like, oh, I can't have my connection with God if I have money. No.
I mean, I had another one. I won't be humble anymore, like, ooh, that one was scary because like you think you're humble. Like you actually think you're humble now. But that was a really funny one. You reminded me of a question that I used to love. I actually made a YouTube video about this really early on when I started my YouTube channel. It's called the $17 million question. So I was listening to a podcast and she asked, what do you made $17 million this year. What do you do with $17 million? Like, how did that change your life? And it was a genius question that she asked her. It was in the podcast, the Get Paid podcast, and the guest was Brooke Castillo. And she was talking about how she had made $17 million that year. And so she asked the host asks her, like, how did your life change? Did you get a cook? Did you get a cleaner? Like, what changed? Because, we're thinking so small, but like, really, what changed? And not a lot changed, except she was able to do certain things that were dreams or whatever. But she still cooks for herself. She still has dinner with her family. Like, things just stayed the same for the most part. And so I started asking people, if you had 17 millions, what would you do with that? And the coolest things would come up. Well, I'd get a big house. Okay, great. You got a big house. Now what? What does your day look like? Well, I guess I would, get an interior designer to design the house. I'm like, great. So you have a big house. It's interior designed. You have all the furniture. Everything's top class. You still have like 16 left, right? Like,
Right.
it's so much money. And so it's like, I don't know, maybe I would learn to dance, or I don't know, maybe I would open up a bakery. Like, suddenly the deepest stuff comes up. Like, what do you really desire? What do you really want? And it was like, great. So do you need $17 million in order to start learning to dance? Do you need 17? So I asked my husband, that was like why the whole thing started, because I asked him, what would you do with $17 million? And he said, I would finally write my book. And I was like, excuse me, you need 17 million for that? Like,
No.
down and type. And he's like, I don't have time. I'm like, yes, you do. You're going to sit down every day and type your book. And of course, he was doing research for 10 years. It's all in his head. He just needs to get it on paper. So he got it out so fast. And then he's like, great, now what? So I'm like, well, if we had $17 million, then I guess we would publish it, like, let's do it. And it was amazing to see that we actually didn't need that much money to get the book out. And we made all the money back by pre-selling. And, after, thank God, already 2 years in a row, it's a Passover Haggadah. So, we've been already, this is the second year that we went through it. Now we have it in English. So it's like, oh, things actually move along when you don't stop yourself, when you get out of your own way. And that was pretty amazing. So I like that you're saying, like, how much money would you give to charity when you had 17 million? Like, oh my gosh, that's like 1.7, right? Like, that's 10%. But is that enough? Like, if I had 17 million, would I only give 1.7, right? Like, people start thinking about these things, or like, oh my gosh, 1.7, that's a lot of money. Like, what would I open up a non-for-profit, or would I just give it to someone else, or what are, like, you start thinking of all these things. It's fascinating.
It totally is. And it also gets to people's deepest causes that speak to them. So if you were saying, I love the question, what would you do with 17 million? Okay. And people said to you, okay, with 1.7 million, these are the charities, these are the things that speak to me. I'm like, okay. I mean, my question's not 17 million, but same ideas, 1 million. I'm like, okay, is that where you're giving your charity now? Oh, we don't give charity, or, oh, not really. Well, then you should be giving your charity, because you'll feel so much better about your money and your values if you're giving to what you really believe in, because you might not get the 17 million.
Right.
But you can give charity today on a small level.
If you give $100 now, and you feel like you're making a difference, it's going to motivate you to make more so you can give more. Like, if you don't give any right now, it feels like, almost like never. Like, one day is so far away that it never really exists.
I've seen people also give 1 million or 100,000. Like, I've seen people give very large money. And it's fascinating, because at the end of the day, they're making the same choice as the person giving the $100. They're just making it with a little more sort of meaning, like they're thinking about it more. And therefore, I encourage the people giving the 100 or even 10, it doesn't matter, to also put that thought in, like, what really is meaningful to you. It just makes us happier, doing what was meaningful. And we feel like, oh, good, I did good in the world. You know what? I gave charity. That's really nice.
I love that. I love that. And it's amazing, because we were talking about that one day thing. Like, one day, your dreams feel so far away because we keep saying one day. It's like we're running after this thing that we don't actually have a date on. Like we don't have a clue if it's ever going to happen. And I was just I just heard about this show. What's going on? I just heard of this show, the Undercover Millionaire.
Okay.
Yes, where they take millionaires that are built themselves up from scratch and made millions of dollars and built businesses, whatever, and they put them undercover and take them to a different state, and they say, how quickly can you make $1 million? And they start out with $100 in their pocket, a cell phone with no contacts. They can't use any of their friends or contacts to make the $1 million. They have to be completely undercover, so nobody knows that they're famous, that they're smart, that they know what they're talking about, that they have experience.
I started to see a new movie.
Okay.
You know what movie?
Okay. Shh. Now check it. It's fascinating just from a business perspective to watch how confident he is. He has 90 days to take $100 and make $1 million. And he has a really hard time, and he goes through all the challenges everybody else goes through. Like the timelines aren't working. There's surprises along the way. He wants to flip a house, but there's mold, and now he doesn't know what to do. Like all these things that come up that are normal. This is normal real life. It's going to happen. And it does not like faze him at all. Yes, like he's like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I forgot how hard it is to start from scratch. I was so used to being rich, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't give up because he knows this is a game for 90 days. Right? And
it's also learned skill.
Exactly. And if
it's
you were
a skill there.
If you were
right.
in that and you didn't know that you had a cozy home to go back to 90 days from now, or if you were going through that difficulty, like, oh my gosh, I don't have a roof over my head, I don't know what to do, I don't have enough money for food, then you get so sucked in by those thoughts that you can't function. And so it really shows that what you're thinking and how confident you are and how much you trust and how, what backwind you have behind you, like that, feeling that everything's going to be okay, changes the way that you react to the same exact situation, which is, it's just fascinating.
It is. They say that if they redistributed the money and gave everyone the same amount of money, like took all the money, distributed it, gave everyone the same amount, within however long, people would go back to having what they had before that, which just shows it's skill. But it's skill, it's knowledge, it's confidence, it's a lot of different things. But it also gives people hope, because it means that even if you don't have, like if you're like, oh, well, I don't have that, it's something you can learn. It's something you can change. It's something you can learn. If you want to, if you're happy with where you are financially, that's amazing. Amazing. We need to be able to say, I'm happy, this is good, or whatever. But for people that are looking to make a change and make more, just know that it is a learned skill. And once you've learned it, once you're like, oh, okay, like now I understand what investing is, and now I understand, what flipping a house is, or whatever it is, yeah, then you have the confidence so that if you're put somewhere and you need to make money, you know how to do it.
Right. And, okay, so you said two things that I want to touch on. I love this conversation. The first one is the money thermostat, which is what you're talking about. And Debbie Sasson gives a whole class on this, where how do you change the thermostat on your money? Because, and a person who has these certain beliefs and has this, whole way that they perceive money, and then suddenly they get all this sudden money, it's going to spend really quickly because they don't know how to hold it. Or if they suddenly lose so much money, they're going to figure out how to get back to comfort zone. Like that thermostat is the comfort zone that you have around money. And it's, like we said, not so much about the money. It's about where you are in the world of the way that you, fisato now, I don't know how to say that. Like the way that your
outlook on money, I guess.
Right. I guess your mindset, your ability to really see it as the big picture. So I love that.
I think on the money thermostat like type thing, I had something to say and now I forgot it. I was going to say something. Oh, about making that change. Okay. For people like, well, whatever. I think the first step, at least the first step for me, was catching my thoughts. Like, oh, why did I think negatively? Why did I say that? Just catching our thoughts and making
I had to do that.
second step. Yeah, just catching any thought, more subconscious thoughts, the better. But any thought, anything we say about money, like, oh, I said this to that person. Did I really believe that? Is that really serving me well? Is that really good? And challenging it. And the second step, that would be the first step. The second step is learning. The more you learn, the more confident you are, whether it's business skills or investment skills or, anything. But the more you learn, the more confident, the more you get ideas, the more you can think outside the box. I did a questionnaire the other day. I sent out a questionnaire to my Facebook group, which has 32,000 members. And it was about how people make it. I live in Israel, so how people make it in Israel. And I wanted to hear their stories. And about 150 people shared the story on like the first day. And it's incredible seeing people's stories of how they make it and what they saw, how they made it. And there are some themes that go along with most of the stories where they made it. They thought outside the box. They were willing to make changes. They were willing to invest. They were willing to invest in themselves, not just like invest in the stock market. They were willing to invest in themselves. They were willing to take some risks. There are things that repeat themselves. And most of the people had that in their story.
That's amazing. I love that. And I'll tell you something that came up before I wanted to tell you one more thing. The guy, so he starts by buying things from the dollar store and flipping them during like a parade and selling them for $5. He makes $400 from his $100. And then he goes and buys finds tires and sells them and has enough money to buy a car, and he flips it and he sells the car and he goes back and he gets another car. So you see how his mind is not thinking, oh, good, I found something. This is new comfort zone. I'm done. I could just stay flipping cars for the rest of my life. He's like, no, I'm just flipping cars so I could buy the house. So then I could buy the house so I could flip the house so I could build my business so I could flip. He's already like a million steps ahead because he isn't in that mindset of, oh, finally, I found something that was just a tiny bit better than where I was before. Like that graspy energy that we have. It's like, okay, finally, I'm out of that hole. Now I'm just going to stay here, comfy, not moving because I'm scared to go back, backwards.
So true.
He's thinking, move forwards. What do I do next? Like, he only flipped 2 cars before he was able to put down on a house, right? It was mind blowing that he wasn't wasting any time.
I totally want to see this show. I've never seen it. I want you to send me the link afterwards. I'd love to see it. It's brilliant. I want to show my kids. I'm always getting my kids to try and think outside the box a little bit. Like, like they're teenagers. So you could babysit, right? But babysit's the lowest paying job per hour generally. What could they do to make more? And we're brainstorming, and it's fascinating. But I'd love to see that show.
Oh my gosh. So I heard about it a long time ago, and I never really gave it a second thought, but a couple of days ago, I decided to Google it or to YouTube it, whatever. And it was really fun. Like, I started watching and I was like, you could learn so much from this. Like,
totally.
Just the fact that he's confident. He's walking in. He knows the rules. He knows you have to just believe in yourself, even though you have no idea what you're doing. You have to exude confidence. You have to, make connections. You have to be yourself. Like, he's really trying to be as authentic as he is without blowing the cover. So he tells all his real stories, like of how he started and how hard it was and whatever. He talks about his real parents and how they went through their hardships. Like, he's not hiding more than he has to, which I find really nice and honest. Obviously, like, he's living a lie. He's in a show, right? But like, within that lie, he's trying to be as himself as possible. And one of the nicest things that I heard him say today, and I'm still in the middle, so I didn't get to the end, but he said, when all these years I have so much money that I sometimes wonder if people are my friends just because of the money or because of me. And this is the first time I get to build a team and talk to people and meet people and like make real connections. And people are happy to just hang out with me for no reason. Like they don't have a clue that I am a multimillionaire, you know? And that was really, he says, like, I'm learning more than I thought I would learn through this process, which by the way, always happens. Throw yourself into a challenge and you're always going to grow from all directions because that's just how life goes. But it's really fascinating. Anyway, that was a bunch of things that came up today for me.
I had a client who inherited a lot of money, and she would go camping with friends, and suddenly, then the camping site was near a hotel, okay? And suddenly she could afford to buy the hotel. So does she still go camping or not? That was the question that came up. And I was like, you like camping, you like your friends, you weren't doing it because you couldn't afford to stay in the hotel. So it's time to like see why you do your stuff. It's not because you couldn't afford the hotel. It's because you enjoy the friends. That's why you're going.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then she's like, well, I'm going through all of this. I have permission to share this. Obviously it's with change details, but I'm going through all of this and I can't tell my friends because none of my friends have this kind of money. And I was like, well, why don't you share what you're going through without saying how much money? Like they know your parents died. So they can know that this is, you know, that you're talking to lawyers, you're talking to accountants. That'll happen to them too if their parents pass away. You know, when their parents pass away, everyone should live a long life, but you know, it does happen. That'll happen to them too. They have no idea if you're talking about $50,000 or, you know, $20 million. That's not relevant. I said, but you can share. You just don't need to tell them the number, because she was scared that if she tells them the number and she's single, you know, the people will start being like, oh, you know, this lady has so much money, and people. She was like, I was like, and also she was like, well, what if I treat my friends to the hotel? I'm like, then you put yourself in a really awkward situation. Because next year, do you treat them again, or do you go camping? They're going to look at you differently. You're going to think of yourself differently. You're going to wonder if they're inviting you because they want you to take you to the hotel. Don't do that. Like, money doesn't need to come in the way. Just you go camping, you enjoy it, go camping. Don't bring this money in. Like, sometimes money doesn't need to come into the picture is basically my message in that.
Right. You know, something that me and my husband like to do is, you know, when something comes up that we have to make a decision, it's like, if we had those $1 million or $17 million, what decision would we make out of abundance? You know, would we rent the 2 cars? Would we rent one big car? We don't fit into one car, obviously. Thank God. And now we're going to have a bigger problem because now we're, you know, expecting number 7 makes everything so interesting. But anyway, you know, do we get a big car, 2 small cars? Do we just take the buses? Like, what would we do from a place of abundance? You know, and we discuss it. And sometimes it's like, well, if we had the money and everything would, you know, work out, then we would get, I don't know, let's say the 2 cars. So then it's like, okay, so now let's figure out how we're doing that. You know, because we just got clarity. We just got clarity about what needs to happen. Like, it has nothing to do with the money. Okay, so you don't have the money, you'll figure out the money. But like, at least you know that if you're going to this party or if you're going to this, you know, trip or whatever, you're not going to schlep 7 kids or 6 kids, you know, with strollers and pack and plays and whatever's on 3 buses for 6 hours. Like, it does not make sense, right? So you get this clarity when you ask the right questions. And I think that for her, the question is opposite. Like, what would I do before I had the money? Right? Like, what would my normal, not thrown into this, like, you know, whirlwind of a new situation, what would I think? You know, and just do that. Like, who cares? You figure it out. Like, it's totally fine to, you know, to be yourself without having that extra headache of what am I doing? Like, she's growing into something new and she's transforming and she's going through this process. It just makes for an interesting, you know, transformation. But you don't have to, like, just like we said, like, do you have to become less connected? Do you have to become less humble? Do you have to become less, you know, authentic? No,
you don't. And
you
that's
just
what
be
she was
yourself.
challenging. Exactly.
Right.
That's what she was challenging. She thought, okay, those people that can afford to, stay in the hotel should stay in the hotel. Like, no, you enjoy camping. There's value in that. That's fun. That's not because we don't have money. It's because for some people it might be. That's fine. But many people camp because they enjoy camping, and that's it.
And you know what? I would not go camping even if people paid me.
Me too. I'm not brave enough. I'm like, I don't want any bugs in my bed, That's my
I
thing.
maybe when I was single, I would do it because I am very, flexible and I go with the flow. And if I'm with friends who are doing it, maybe I would do it. But as a mother with kids and whatever, it's just not a place I would put myself. Like I have friends who make it a fun thing in the summer to go camping outside your house, like in the yard, right? And it's so fun, and they make marshmallows and they do this and they do that. They tell stories. It doesn't even like, I don't know, it's just not my thing, so that's one of those things that you really ask yourself, like, is it my thing or is it something that I'm expected or should do, which is another huge can of worms, like the shoulds and the expectations from others and like what everybody is supposed to do. Like this is like my favorite one with your husband, like he's supposed to know that I don't like flowers. He should do this and that, right? Like, oh, forget it. Stop.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah.
there's a lot of also with money, with the money expectations, same idea. Like, oh, she should make a living or he should make a living or they should move forward. Like, we don't always know. We can try and work together and, make it happen.
Oh, the worst one is we should have more money by now. I think like, the couples who are 15, 20 years married, one of the biggest things is like what should have been. Like I should have, been more successful by now, or we should have whatever. Like that's where the midlife crisis comes from. It's like you compare yourself to what you think where you think you're supposed to be. Even if it's not necessarily comparing to other people, it's comparing to where you think you need to be. And it's a terrible thing because it sets you up for all sorts of, negative feelings.
Right. I think if people have a plan though, like I think, when I sit with people and they're like, okay, we'd like to have this and that and whatever, it saves, and you set a plan like, okay, save this much, invest that much, do this, do that, within 3 years, you need to have either moved job, got a better, whatever position. Like you sort of set out to people what it's going to take to get to where they're thinking of. So they don't come to you in 20 years and be like, we should have been in this place. No, you didn't take the steps because you maybe didn't think about it. But a lot of times when we think about it and we plan our finances, we get to where we want to get to. I always say, be careful what you dream of. It might happen financially. And so many people come back to me and they're like, that was so true. I didn't realize it could happen. And we're not talking like crazy stuff, but like things people are like, I don't know. I'm like, write down, when I'm getting people to write down different things, like dream of whatever, what you would have, what you'd make, how you do. And like, they're like, wow, it happened. And you're like, yeah, be careful what you think of. Be careful what you think of, because a lot of times it happens.
Yeah. And that's why we're so afraid of dreaming. We're so afraid of even opening up our mouth because the bigger fear than fear of failure is fear of success. And I know this about myself, like I was holding myself back for a long time when I was a graphic designer. I'm like, what if I actually succeed? What if I actually get to the next level? What if people actually know that I'm the best at what I do? And then they start calling me and then I start getting busy and then I won't be able to be with my kids. And like you go through these like worst case scenarios instead of just like letting it be. It's part of the fear of success, and you have to just let that go and get out of your own way. Like just let it be.
So true in money, so true in business, so true in marriage.
Yes, because it's all integrated and it's all one. And that's why I love what I do is I don't see anything in a vacuum. Like a lot of people are like, well, I don't care. This is what I work with and everything else is not my, my forte. Like parenting is going to come up in marriage, and money is going to come up in marriage, and
Oh, yeah.
in-laws are going to come up in marriage. And so that's why I chose marriage. I wanted to find the one thing that will affect everything else. When we fix this one thing that's not working, if I can help you work out your marriage to the point where it's like things are actually falling into place, and it's suddenly like, oh, my kids are doing much better. They're less stressed about whatever is going on in the house because we're not fighting anymore. And then, his finances are doing better because he's finally not stressed about me thinking he's not enough. And, my in-laws are actually liking me because I stopped talking bad about them, whatever. Like, your entire ecosystem changes.
Yeah. I have somebody who wrote in my recommendation something like, it's unbelievable what falls into place when you figure out your money stuff. And not because money can buy it, but because you've sort of, the whole cycle just fits better.
Yeah. Okay. One more thing about that show, because you just said something that was like, oh my gosh, mind blowing. He had in his account, quote unquote, like in his pocket, from the $100 he made, he flipped, whatever, he gets to the point where he has something like $3,000 or something, or around that. He spends $1,000 to call a lawyer to ask him a question about his idea so that he doesn't have to go through this loops and hoops and everything for nothing, And it's like, he explains you have to invest in real professionals who are really doing what they're doing because they can save you so much money. And you're thinking, but it's a third of your money. It's a ton of money. Like, he's thinking like a millionaire, $1,000, you pay the guy, he gives you advice, you're done. But for a person who's living on that money, like, all I have is $3,000. I need to still pay rent. I still need to eat. I still need to do that. And then I also have to create more money from that. You get into this like paralysis of, I don't know what to do with, maybe I'll just go along with whatever and not ask. And it's like, no, invest in the experts because they know, they're going to help you. So I feel like, getting a course like what you have, or even hiring you as a financial advisor, or whatever it is that you call yourself. I just decided for you.
That's fine.
Is worth the money because it puts you on the right track so that you are actually going to make more money from that money just by the fact that you invested in a professional and not decided to DIY everything yourself. And, that's a huge, huge lesson. Like,
Totally.
Sorry I went back to him, but it was just like, right? Mind blown.
The path, just making one angle of difference is like, it really can trigger so many differences in your finances over the years, and you land at a different spot. There's no question. And that's even from one-time meeting some people sometimes, or just from taking the course that couples are now like talking and thinking together, so they don't come 20 years down the line and be like, we're frustrated, we have money frustrations. Like, no, you could have discussed it from the beginning and been together and dealt with money well from the beginning, learned about investing, spent some time on talking business ideas, being open to them, whatever it is from the beginning, and you might have done much better financially.
Right. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Wow. Okay. This was fascinating beyond belief. I'm having so much fun with you. We could be talking forever. And it's funny because I did not expect to say any of these things. Like, they're just coming out as we're talking because there's just so much to talk about. Tell us how people can take your course, or get in touch with you, or any of that stuff. By the way, one thing I do want to say is that if you have children who are getting married, or couples who you see are struggling, it's going to be more valuable for them to get a present that's an actual course that will teach them these things than to get them another set of pots or whatever, like bedding sheets and I don't know, whatever else you were thinking of getting them. Like, it just feels like this is so valuable, especially after all that we discussed. It was something that just came up to me in the afternoon. Like, I don't know if anybody thought of this, to just gift this to someone, but if they did, that would be genius.
So
Really?
that was my original idea, is like, make this as a course, get parents or aunts and uncles or whatever, family who know the couple well, to give the couple this as a course if the couple wants it. That's one thing I always say, because otherwise, like, couple who doesn't know they're supposed to deal with money are like, well, what's flying here? But get it as a gift. It's priced like a wedding gift. It's not, it's not crazy expensive. Get it as a gift. It's going to pay off 100 times minimum. So anyway, I can be reached at Rifka, Rifka, at rifkalebowitz.com. And I'm going to put in the chat here, I'm going to send you a link to the course, which you could share. And I'm also going to give you a 20% off for anyone listening here. Use the code ConnectedForReal, small letters, no capitals. ConnectedForReal, one long word, and you can get 20% off the course.
Woohoo! Yay! We love coupons. And by the way, even when I have, millions and millions, I still love coupons. It just makes it feel so fun. You feel like you got a deal, right? I love that.
Even if you had 17 million, you'd get the 20% off. How's that?
Yeah, exactly. If I had the $17 million, I think I would hire you and like make you part of my team.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
I'm going to write Connected for Real coupon code for all of you who are in the chat. Thank you so, so much. It's been a real pleasure, and I really enjoyed it. This is my last live before I have the baby, so I will not be back next week, but you can keep in touch with me on Facebook or on Instagram at ConnectedForReal. And I guess stay in touch, stay tuned. I will announce hopefully, when I go into labor and when I have the baby and all those fun things. And a big announcement coming soon that we are actually going to be opening up a podcast, and all of these lives are going to be showing up there so that you can hear them again and remind yourself how awesome some of my amazing friends and colleagues and guests are. So definitely come back for that and look up Connected for Real podcast. Thank you, Rifka Lebowitz.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and well done on the work you do. You do amazing work. And it was really an honor to be invited to speak with you this evening.
Thank you. This was really fun.